I've been tracking for years, and working with Mark Shuttleworth, who I had no idea who he was until he started Ubuntu. And I fly out to the Bay Area for this UDS, and I'm surrounded by people who are smarter than me, and I was terrified. And I had to do an opening presentation as a new community manager to introduce the event and all the rest of it. And I was nervous about how I was going to come across to these people, but then I thought, you know what, you got to be yourself. And so I did my very first presentation in front of the Ubuntu community, wearing a T-shirt of a band, a death metal band from Poland called Decapitated. And I could see when I walked up there, a bunch of people thinking, what on earth is going on? And I just said, that's who I am, because I went through this when we were doing Lug Radio, and I was a journalist at the time. And Lug Radio, for those people who haven't heard it, was pretty raw, radio show. It was very much like Howard Stern. And we set out, frankly, to annoy people, to a reasonable degree. We set out to be controversial at times, which that's when I was young and far more stupid than I am right now. And I remember going to karate one night and being worried, thinking, "Ooh, I hope this isn't going to fit my career." But then I thought, no, I'm gonna be who I am and not be afraid or ashamed of being who I am. So, 7th, 5th, and Canonical, it's not really that big of a deal because I've been who I am since I joined Canonical. Pretty much everyone in the Ubuntu community who knows who I am knows that I love heavy metal, and a lot of them know that I play music because we play music every Friday night at EUDS. So I don't think it was a huge surprise. The only area where I think I've had to modify my behavior is, I tweet a lot about 7th, 5th, I blog a lot about 7th, 5th, and at one point someone came up to me and said, it kind of seems like you're doing 7th, 5th, like, when you're at work. And the problem was that, people didn't know my time zone. So I'd be tweeting about it and it looked like I'm at work, but it's actually in my evening. And that's because when you have a fairly public position, like a community manager, your spare time and your work time blend into each other. Like Roy's point earlier on about you're seen as, you're representing the project, right? So I've had to be much more careful in making sure that I'm clear about when I'm speaking for Ubuntu and when I'm not.
It's a fantastic project, and anybody who's into metal, and even if you're not, I think should go and visit your site. There'll be links in the show notes to your works. A very, very quick question, and again, I appreciate I don't want to intrude on privacy here, but
no.
There's been a lot of debate about copyright and about new delivery methods for music and movies and et cetera. Your experience of the Creative Commons and releasing your music on effectively a donation basis, has that been something viable or something that you would consider viable if you were, say, doing 7th, 5th as a full-time job?
Well, this has been what's been fascinating is the music world. So I'm going to talk from a position of heavy metal, and I think the same applies to most musicians. You have this kind of this perspective that music is this incredibly illustrious world in which people get paid a ton of money and they build guitar shaped swimming pools and mansions in Monaco and all that kind of stuff. For most musicians who play in bands, there's not a lot of money in it. A friend of mine who is in a incredibly successful metal band was telling me that his friend said to him, who's starting out in a band, said, what's your tip for somebody who wants to be a professional musician? And his advice was, don't be. He said, there's no money in it. I mean, one of the most famous metal musicians is he drives a cab in San Francisco. A lot of the guys who are in some of these famous bands have manual labor that they do during the day, and they go from job to job because they need to be in a position where they can go on tour if they're requested to. And so it's a pretty frugal existence, being in a band and trying to be successful. Even, bands that, well-known bands that are established, that are signed, it's a pretty frugal existence. So, the Creative Commons approach to, generating revenue, I think is actually fairly applicable because the expectations are pretty low. I mean, a lot of metal musicians who play shows, if they get paid $30, $40 for a show, or maybe $50 for a show, then that's seen as, that's basically the expectations in terms of pay. Which means that donations from the community could actually support that. You're never going to live in a particularly huge house, or, you're going to be living a more frugal existence. But those expectations are kind of, are a bit lower. But it's, the thing that I think where my perspective has changed a little bit about it is, it's been fascinating for me to get to know people who are working in that lifestyle. And also the fact that the Creative Commons can actually be a threat to that lifestyle to a small degree. Like, there is a perception that, well, if you go around giving your music away for free, it makes it hard for people where every penny counts. And I'm currently just trying to process that myself and how I think about that, and how that works. So it's weird, but it's been a bit of, that's why I say it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Is that, if you're a hobbyist and you're just doing this in your spare time, and giving your music away for free is no big deal. But if it's your career, it's different.
I think that the same applies to all kinds of occupation these days, where there is this notion of expression, and people do want their music to be shared. I watched a very long talk yesterday about from Gary Lessig, and there is also an interesting talk where he starts to address the issue of open access. And basically what he's saying is that publishers and companies and bodies like the IEEE, they basically have people working for free, and they make money out of other people's work, and they become the sort of the RAA of people's academic papers. What actually happens there is when you go and approach those scientists to actually contribute to papers, you do find out all they want to do is for the papers to go to as many people as possible. They don't have gatekeepers, and they don't really want. They just take it for granted that somebody will act as a gatekeeper and try to extort a lot of money out of people who don't work for a very lucrative university that gives them access to journals. What he's doing there is he's trying to encourage the understanding that people, all they want to do is basically to publish so that people read their papers, to have some recognition or something, which usually helps them in some way. The same goes for some people who blog or write articles. They want their work to be out there. With musicians too, as far as I can tell, the reason people will be willing to have these manual labor during the daytime, and being able to sustain what they actually enjoy doing. I think it's a whole different mode of thinking. I mean, some people think the way they score things is how much money is this person. But they don't ask how many hours a week does the person work. And some people work 80 hours a week.
It really is. I mean, it's what's been fascinating is that I looked at Severed Fifth purely from the perspective of a musician who wants to distribute music in a way in which they're not depending on the revenue. Like, when I started Severed Fifth, and to this day, I don't depend on Severed Fifth to earn my living. If we didn't make a penny, honestly, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I'd pay for the recording out of my own pocket. We divided it between the band. If we don't get paid for shows, it's not that big of a deal. And that's really the difference between a hobbyist, I think, and a career musician, is that, from some of the feedback that I've heard from some of the, established musicians in the area, if you're doing this and you have to support your family, it's very different. You have to get paid at shows, because it's your livelihood. And, the implications for the Creative Commons, are slightly different. I don't think it's a risk at all. I don't think the Creative Commons is a risk towards, active playing musicians, because I think that the opportunity behind giving your music away for free and, building a community around the band is significant. The thing that I've learned, though, is I'd never really thought about it from that perspective before, and that's what's been interesting. That's what's been a great piece of the experiment. This was all an experiment. I never went into this.
I think the business model that depends on scarcity of information in the age of the internet is going to fail anyway. Everyone's competing, and the convergence is somewhere around the zero as the cost, so people will look for what's cheaper, what's easily accessible. And if somebody is going to offer things at zero, the competition will just race towards this bottom. I mean, some people will be willing to even pay for, people to listen to their music, to get free samples. What happens with operating system these days is even in some cases, without mentioning companies, they'll be willing to pay for somebody to pre-install their operating system based on, like, maybe they pre-install something like an